Welcome back. Tariffs didn't come on day one, but in some ways that could be a more ominous sign of more structural changes coming to the North American trade framework. What are businesses supposed to do ahead of so much unknown? Joy Nott is a partner of Trade and Customs at KPMG. Joy, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Amanda.
So let's start with what businesses have been doing. We've had plenty, well, not plenty, but we've certainly had some warning that some kind of tariffs may be headed our way. What are you advising your clients to be thinking about?
Well, we're certainly advising not to sit back and to wait until either February 1st or April 1st, depending on which date you want to believe the tariffs will potentially start. We're certainly advising not to wait until then. There's lots of proactive rather than reactive steps that they can be taking in advance of the tariffs actually coming into place. You know, when we speak to a lot of companies, they don't, the actual impact, the real dollar impact that the tariffs are going to have is not necessarily clear to all companies. It's not as simple as taking 25% of sales to the United States and multiplying it by 25%. It's not that simple. More nuanced than that.
And so, I mean, and as I understand it, many people have contracts. They need to be reading the fine prints to understand if they're able to pass on their costs in their contracts. I mean, presumably there's already been a great deal of cost that people have, or time at least, that people have kind of undertaken trying to figure out where they sit with all of this. How are people feeling, do you think, business leaders that you're dealing with, about just the level of uncertainty that they're sitting in?
I mean, the feeling, generally speaking, is obviously cautious, but I wouldn't say it's pessimistic. In many ways, we've been here before, not only with the Trump administration, but with the COVID-19 pandemic. There was lots of uncertainty in supply chains. So having uncertainty in supply chains is not something that companies in Canada haven't dealt with in the past few years. So, you know, I think that there's a feeling of cautious optimism is how I would put it. And I mean, probably the strongest thing that we can suggest that they do is to run a number of what-if scenarios, to really understand, take their trade data and run various what-if scenarios so that depending on what happens, you know, that they're as ready as they possibly can be for the impact of the tariffs and have an actual understanding of what the real dollar impact will be to their company.
In some ways, Joy, if we get big tariffs, like a 25% across the board, it'll, in a way, be a positive thing, because that's not a lasting situation. That's not the kind of thing the U.S., I think, could think would last forever. It would feel like a negotiating tactic, and businesses probably could rely on government intervention of some kind. What if, and this is a possibility, the U.S. is rethinking our relationship, and they put on lower-level tariffs, 5%, 10%, that are designed to be there permanently? Have people started to grapple with that concept of really rethinking the total trade relationship?
I think people realize that almost everything is on the table. And just to clarify one point, at this point, we're not clear if the tariffs are going to apply on everything that goes from Canada into the United States or only goods that are made in Canada that go to the United States. So we're not exactly sure which one of those two scenarios. We believe that it's going to be on goods made in Canada that will attract the tariff. And if there were lower tariffs, I mean, I think people are bracing for the worst and hoping for something less than the worst.
And in terms of bracing for the worst, what is the right thing to be doing? If you're a business leader, last time Trump was in the White House, people sat on cash. Businesses didn't invest. Do you expect to see more of that?
You know, I think that's really dependent on each individual company and their cash position and where they sit financially. But I mean, some of the tactical things that they can be doing is actually doing things that most don't do in the regular course of their business. Just for example, mapping their supply chains and all of their sales structures, actually understanding going backwards in their supply chain and forward in their supply chain to their customers in the United States, actually who's responsible for what, who's buying from what, who's selling from what, because there's a number of different strategies that can be undertaken to mitigate the tariffs. You can't necessarily eliminate them, but you can certainly look at mitigating them.
Unfortunately, we've got to leave it there, but lots of options, obviously, for business to be grappling with. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Joy Nott is a partner of Trade and Customs at KPMG. When it comes to potential tariffs, what are the options for a response from a government that isn't sitting? Michael Wernick was Canada's top civil servant as clerk of the Privy Council. He's now a professor at the University of Ottawa. Michael, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for calling.
So with Parliament prorogued, it does feel in some ways a little bit like you could think of it as being a bit sort of rudderless here. But what are the available responses to tariffs that may or may not come in the next week or two?
Well, we elect governments to make these decisions, and we're not rudderless. We have a functional federal government, and we have governments in place in all of the provinces and territories as well. Parliament is not sitting, so the only tool that's not available would be to pass a brand new law or a brand new budget. But we have a government, we have ministers, all the laws and tools are in place for our politicians to decide what to do.
So because there's a lot of unknown here, Michael, so there's a lot of speculation that's happening right now. But what's not, of course, speculation is we will have to redraft the USMCA. It's up for negotiation in 2026. It seems as though all of this might be part of that process, and we might even drag the negotiations forward a bit and be right into it in 2025. Are you confident that we are in the right position to be doing that based on what happened the last time we negotiated and sort of our current relationship with the U.S.? Are we going to be okay as we work through this new NAFTA?
Well, there's a lot of things to worry about. I mean, we have another 1,460 days of Donald Trump to deal with, and he can change his mind from hour to hour. I'm not sure if we're dealing with shrewd positional bargaining or somebody who's incredibly erratic and mercurial. I think the thing that we don't have to worry about is Canadian governance. We have all of the tools in place, and we'll pick the leaders that we think are best suited to deal with this, whether it's at the federal level or apparently in Ontario.
Yes, because we may well, of course, be going to the polls in Ontario soon. Do you think that the sort of posturing that happens almost as a matter of course, between premiers, but the sort of disputes we're seeing openly around, can we use oil as a leverage chip or not? Is that good or bad for Canada when it comes to kind of the face that we're offering to the U.S.?
Well, I think that we have to take Donald Trump very seriously and at his word, even if his word changes from day to day. So we need as Canadians to debate and discuss how to deal with him. Is this rational negotiation or not? Should we oppose him or appease him? I think it's in the national interest for us to put up as united a front as possible, have our discussions among ourselves, but present a united front to Donald Trump and his team. And so I think, I'm a little bit more in the Doug Ford camp than the Danielle Smith camp.
And do you think there could be an opportunity here? We talk a lot about the internal trade barriers. There are things, of course, in our trade agreements that we could do better. And there's the thing of diversifying trade with other partners. Could all of this be a bit of a moment for Canada to do some things that we should be doing anyway?
Well, we're going to have an election either in April or May, the very, very latest October. And I think we should be challenging the political parties and leaders to put forward some ideas and some proposals and some vision of where they want to take Canada. Yes, we can obviously do better. We can diversify trade. We can work on productivity. We can work on climate. There are lots and lots of issues for the next government to do. And we're going to pick a government this year. So we should be pressing them for what they want to do.
Michael Wernick, great to have you with us. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks for calling.
Michael Wernick was clerk of the Privy Council, now a professor at the University of Ottawa. Coming up, as more drinkers turn away from the habit, how will the industry respond? Stay with us.